Hi everyone, I'm Maurice Volk, and today I'll be taking you through my latest Blender add-on called Whippet. It combines both of my previous add-ons, Whippet GP and Whippet Shots, into one intuitive add-on to help artists create shots and tell stories faster inside of Blender. There are three core features that come with Whippet. 1. Intuitive camera management tools to help you create shots quickly. 2. Custom grease pencil functions that provide a traditional 2D storyboard feel. And 3. A nonlinear workflow allowing you to render Playblasts from multiple cameras and multiple scenes into a VSE workspace to cut and animatic together. This video has chapters for each section, and there's a full documentation page linked in the description below explaining all the features. I just want to give a quick overview on where Whippet lies among all the other storyboard add-ons for Blender. If you're interested in any of the other storyboarding add-ons, please check out the description below with all their links. Whippet 2.0 will integrate with the Blender 5.0 update, which brings a new storyboarding feature native to Blender using sequence strips. After you purchase the add-on, you'll receive a downloadable zip file. In that zip file will contain a Python file, which includes my keyboard shortcuts, and then the other zip file is the actual add-on itself. So you'll want to move the Whippet add-on 1.0 4.5 zip file somewhere on your desktop. That's what you'll select to install the add-on in Blender. Inside Blender 4.5, in order to install the add-on, you want to go to Edit, Preferences, and then click on Install from Disk. Locate that zip file I just pointed out. Ensure that the add-on itself is enabled. If this doesn't pop up like that, then go ahead and just scroll down to the bottom or search Whippet and make sure that it's enabled. Whippet 1.0 comes with some preferences settings, so you can adjust the default value for a few fields that I'll show you in a minute. But here you can adjust them, and then if you close and reopen your file, it will default to those. You can also change the size of some of the gizmo buttons and the spacing, and also the size of the camera strips inside the Dopesheet. There's also a lens kit feature, so if you're working on multiple projects and you're trying to go, you're switching between different projects that may have different lens kits, you can go ahead and add them. If you want to add a new lens kit, you can just hit the plus button. You can double click to rename them, and then you can enter the focal length that you want and click add, and just do that process for all the different focal lengths that you want. And then inside the Whippet panel, you'll be able to select the different lens kits. Okay, so Whippet is located in several places. It's located in the viewport N panel. So if you press N, it'll pop up, and then you want to locate to Whippet. And here you've got all the camera tools, as well as all the grease pencil tools and the various menus. If you switch the timeline to the Dopesheet, you'll see there are custom buttons displayed here for workflow purposes. I'll walk you through each of those in a little bit. There's also a panel in the side panel or end panel of the Dopesheet as well, where you'll see the camera list and some core grease pencil functionality for flipping between keyframes. When you're in draw mode, there is also a custom pop-up menu. So if I hit right click, because I bound this pop-up menu to my right click, it'll basically give you all the grease pencil menus that you need, as well as some of the Whippet features like setting the frame hold, that kind of thing, and the outliner menu as well. Let's switch over to the video editing workspace. In the end panel of the sequencer, you can find your little sidebar here, and there's another set of tools that comes with Whippet, and I'll go over those when we get through rendering a Playblast. A lot of the custom Whippet operators can be mapped to your keyboard shortcuts, so I'll show you how to do that. So you can do that manually yourself, or you can install the Python file that comes with the zip file. So if you go to Edit, Preferences, then go down to Key Map, this is where you can basically customize all of your keyboard shortcuts. So I'll just show you an example here. If you go down to Grease Pencil, you go down to Grease Pencil Paint Mode. If you want to add a custom keyboard shortcut, all you would have to do is click Add New, open this up, and then you would search, Whippet, GP, and then you would select from the various custom operators that come with the add-on. And then here you would basically set the keyboard shortcut that you would like. In the documentation, there's a full list of all of my keyboard shortcuts, and as well as the actual context of where they live, because keyboard shortcuts depend on where your mouse is hovering over, so you can have different shortcuts for different workspaces and like between the viewport and the Dopesheet. If you want to delete a keyboard shortcut, you can just press remove the key map item here. If you do not want to add all the keyboard shortcuts manually yourself and you would like to just use the ones that I use, then you can come up to import, find that Python file, the Maurice Valk Blender key map, and what that will do is essentially add a new key map setting right here. And so it'll just come up like this, and then basically all my keyboard shortcuts will work on your version of Blender. If you ever want to go back, you can just hit Blender and make your own. Whippet utilizes a nonlinear editing workflow using Playblasts. Here's a diagram showing the workflow. Don't worry, it might look a little confusing, but it's actually pretty straightforward once you know your way around Blender and once I show the setup inside the Blender file. Basically, we need a scene to create shots and a separate workspace and a separate scene to cut the footage together. That's known as the Video Sequencer Editor, the VSE. You can have multiple scenes to create shots, which can be rendered and added to the same VSE. So here in the diagram, you can see the top thing is the actual Blender file, which I recommend doing, a few minutes worth of work. You probably don't want to storyboard an entire pilot in one blend file. That would just get a little hairy. So inside that blend file, you can have multiple scenes. So for instance, we could have an exterior scene where you shoot footage outside of a house. Let's say a character is approaching the house. And then you might have another scene set up, which is the inside of the house. So in other words, you wouldn't have to model the exterior of the house and the interior in the same set, but instead you would, model the exterior of a house, keep it simple, and then shoot that footage. And then you would model the interior of a house in a separate scene and then shoot that footage. And this is actually how you would go about shooting in real life, right? Like you doing live action as well. So in those different scene setups, we'll have all of our cameras, and then the exterior 001, that's a camera, exterior 002, those will be the camera names. And then from there, we render all of our footage and it all gets put into our video editing scene. And then that's considered our edit. And then when we export, once we have cut all our footage together, then we have a final export video. All right, so back in Blender, it is really easy to set this up. We just need a workspace where we create our storyboards and our footage, and then we need a workspace where we have our video editing set up. So here you can see this is my storyboard workspace. I have a separate workspace tab for it, and I have a scene name that is 3 digits. It needs to be 3 digits because that'll be the prefix for all of the collections and cameras. And in addition to that, the scene needs to be pinned to its respective workspace. So make sure that you've got this pin toggled on. And pro tip, just copy your 3 prefix name here, and then you can just double click and paste it here. And that's how you set up the shooting scene. Now we need a separate workspace for video editing. If you don't have one, you can hit the plus button, come down to video editing and add that. So inside the video editing workspace, we just want to ensure that we have a separate scene for video editing. All of our footage that we create in our storyboard scenes, so that's this first workspace, will be added to this one singular video editing workspace. So this allows us to use multiple scenes to create footage if we need to, and then it all gets funneled into one video editing workspace. So if you want to create an additional scene, here at the top of the Whippet panel, you can actually duplicate the workspace, and then you can click Add New Scene, and then I can call it 2D, B. And then now we have a whole new setup, and we have an additional workspace tab for the next scene, and it's already pinned because we had that setting on before. And then here you can see we have the 2 shooting scenes, and then you can go about doing whatever you need to create more footage. And then when you render a Playblast, it'll go into that same video editing workspace and scene. All right, now we're ready to start storyboarding. To make the most out of Whippet, there's a custom collection system in which you can cycle through grease pencil objects. All your cameras are then contained into a separate collection, allowing you to select multiple cameras more easily. And so here at the top again, there's this step 3 button, and basically you click that and you'll get a Whippet collection system. And you'll see that the prefix of the folders are the same as your scene name. So it's just easier to sort everything and find stuff. And then Whippet uses that. And then from here, you're basically ready to go. You can just start creating a camera. So here in our side panel, we've got new camera tools. So you can adjust all the duration of a new camera, the focal length. Again, here you can select the different lens kits. So if you want to, if you're on different projects, you can do that. If you, for whatever reason, want a custom focal length, you can just click on the focal length dropdown, hit custom, and then whatever number you have here is the focal length that'll be used. Otherwise, it'll revert back to the focal length that's set here in the dropdown. The duration is the number of frames for the camera. The camera gap, I'll show you that in a little bit, but basically, if we're using the 2D storyboard mode, then it'll automatically set a gap of frames between the previous camera and the next camera. And then all you have to do is just kind of, find your shot wherever you want to line up a camera. Let's say we do a little 3/4, and then all we do is hit add new. With our new camera, we can adjust any of the settings afterwards as well. So underneath new camera tools, we have camera view settings. This adjusts how we can look through the active camera. So we can jump in and out of it with this button. It's the same thing here. You can lock the camera to view. So now wherever I, drag on the viewport, the camera will also move. You can adjust the passe part out, however you say that, if you would like to do that here. You can add a couple of camera guides. So I have thirds, center, and safe areas here. All of these are adjustable inside your camera menu. So if you select your camera, you can come down here and adjust your safe area stuff. You can also toggle off all other camera icons, which I'll show later when we have multiple cameras. Lastly, we have the camera gizmo button. This will basically display a bunch of gizmo buttons underneath the camera, and it allows you to essentially adjust and help you do camera moves. With Blender 4.5, you can now have custom icons here. So I've added some useful little controls to help you refine and make camera moves. So if you just hover over them, it'll tell you what each of them does. This one allows you to select the actual camera object. So let's say you're on something else and you want to actually make sure that you have the camera selected. That's that. This is, again, the camera icons, which is this button. Basically, it'll hide all the other camera icons in the scene. So if you have like 10 other cameras in the background, you can hide all of them. These are your, your field guides. And then this button here will add a new grease pencil object right in front of the camera. This one will add a grease pencil object at the 3D cursor. And then this button will display any object you have selected in front of all the other ones, which is handy for drawing grease pencil objects if they're behind certain objects and you want to make sure that the proportion is correct. And then just below the camera view settings, we have the active camera settings. So here you can select the camera object again. You can adjust the focal length. You can set the clipping range and some basic depth of field settings as well, which are all usually buried inside the camera panel here. So they're just kind of conveniently placed here. And then lastly, I've got the actual camera item values for its transformations. And this is something I use to make precise movements, so I wanted to add that in as well. So it's more easily accessible and you don't have to go to the item side panel menu. You can just have everything right here. Okay, so if we want to see the duration of our camera in the Dopesheet, we just come down to our Dopesheet header toolbar over here, and there's this camera strip buttons. So if we click that, it'll display all of our cameras and their respective duration. Additionally, we can come to the camera list here in our main end panel. If you open this up, you'll see we have a couple of buttons. Each camera will be listed here with its in and out point. You can also access this in the Dopesheet. If you just scroll to the top here, you have your camera list here. So in case you want to select it here or there, both are available. We can adjust the timing simply by dragging the ins and out points. So if you want the camera to start sooner or later, you can absolutely do that. You can also type it in. In this next section, we're going to take a look at how we can use multiple cameras to kind of have a real-time edit. So you can actually watch the timeline play, and it can jump between the different cameras. If we want to shoot coverage, or if we want to have breaks between our cameras, we can choose how to work. All right, so I have a grease pencil object here that's just being animated on an object level and just jumping over the box. And so now I'm going to show you if you want to add a couple of other cameras to get either coverage of this or just continue telling a story. So if at any point you can, jump out of this camera, and let's say you want to add a camera to capture the jump up on top of the box, we can just come over here, and then I'll turn off 2D storyboard mode, which I'll get into in the next section, and show you all the Whippet GP integration features. And let's just say I want a camera that's maybe a 50 and position something like this, looking at the reverse of the grease pencil object jumping over the box. So I can hit add new, and then now you can see that we have a second camera strip with its duration, and then in the camera list we also have the respective ins and out points of that camera. So as you can see, if I scrub the timeline, it now switches to that other camera, which is pretty nice. So we can see the playback of multiple cameras in one Dopesheet. Now, there's a couple of additional features that help you actually work with this workflow. So, for instance, if you want to see how all of the camera's footage play back to back, you can hit this Whippet playback button. It's a custom button that basically will play through each camera strip and then jump to the start of the next one. So if I hit this button, it will play all the way through, and then it will jump to the next camera that comes up in the camera list, which is based off of the endpoint. So as you can see here, we have a bit of extra coverage, but that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe just trim this down. So again, if you hit the regular play, it'll just jump to the next shot. But if you hit this play button, then it will actually play all the way through and then start on the next one. There is an overlap feature, so if you have overlap shots, this will prioritize actually switching to the next camera. So here you can see that it kind of just like a regular mode playback, but what you'll see here in a second when I add a third camera, it'll actually jump the camera gaps using this custom play feature. So let me go ahead and do that. So let's say the grease pencil object comes to a stop here, and then let's say we want like maybe a close-up reaction shot of the character, and I'm just going to start at frame 200 to show you how having a gap between cameras works. And then we can change the duration here. I'll do a 75 and then hit add new. I'm going to go ahead and just adjust it a little bit, get this up shot here. Okay. So now you can see that we have a gap between cameras. This is generally a good workflow practice. That way you have room to adjust things, move keyframes around, move drawings around. But when we use Blender's native playback, it won't auto skip to that camera. It will switch to the camera, but it won't skip to it. So if we use the Whippet version, it'll actually jump to the first frame of the next camera, and it'll do that for all the cameras. Okay, now let's say we have a bunch of cameras to get coverage, and maybe in our real-time edit we don't actually want to see one of the cameras. In our camera list, we have these little check boxes. This basically determines whether a camera is active in when we hit play. This works for both play methods, whether you're using the standard Blender one or the Whippet version. So here you can see that the second camera is not activated, and it only plays the two that are activated. Let's say you want to work on this first camera here, and as you scrub it, it keeps switching to the other one automatically. So let's say you want to isolate just one camera, and so you can scrub and just work from that camera's perspective. You can come over here and click the toggle all. What it will do is it'll deactivate all other cameras, and then so you can basically work in like an isolated mode. So now it won't actually switch to any of the other cameras. It'll just stay on this one camera. And if you click it back on, it'll bring all the ones that were previously on, toggle them back on. So for instance, if I toggle this off, so now Whippet knows that I have chosen to deliberately deactivate this one while also having other ones active. If I hit toggle all, it'll deactivate all the rest, but then when I toggle this all back on, it'll actually remember that I had this one toggle off. So just keep that in mind when you're playing around with cameras and editing and stuff like that. If you're deciding to do test little edits out in your storyboard workflow here. All right, so rounding out the last few features here, we have a couple extra buttons that I didn't go over. So this one will set the preview range to the current camera. So if I click on that, you'll see that the Blender preview range here in the Dopesheet will just snap to the ins and outs. So I'll go ahead and deactivate this guy. So now if I hit play, it'll just loop all the way through. And then if I want to use the Whippet play feature to loop a certain section of cameras, I can also do that, and then it will just loop through it like that. If I press the set preview range to shot again, it'll toggle it off. Okay, let's say you want to move some animation keyframes along with the camera strips. So for instance, if I just go ahead and add a maybe a quick pan to this shot, I can just do this, so that way we have more keyframes. In order to move stuff on the Dopesheet, if you're doing some keyframe management, what you can do is basically select everything, all the keyframes you want to move, and if any of those keyframes fall within a camera strip's range, then we can actually automatically slide the camera strips wherever we drag the keyframes. So in order to do that, we need to come up here and hit move keys and camera strips together. This button will kind of activate a mode, letting Whippet know to move the camera strips and the camera timing basically with your keyframe. So if I click this and then I just want to say let's start it all the way over here because we need extra space or whatever. When you're happy moving it, just toggle this off, and then the camera strips themselves will auto adjust and snap to how it was. So now if I toggle off the second camera, we see that retain all the timing because we dragged all the keyframes we needed. We just moved everything around. Another way to manage your Dopesheet and all the keyframes, if you need to add more keyframes after the playhead, let's say I want to create a shot before these three cameras, what you can do is move your playhead before all the frames that you want to move. And for any unlocked keyframe channel, you can come up to here and hit this button called add gap frames, and what that'll do is you can set the number of frames you want to add, and anything after the playhead will move by that many frames. So if I click it, you can see everything is jumping, and it will say added 50 frames after frame 20, and you can keep doing this. So this helps you give you more space and help rearrange and organize things on the timeline. And then lastly, I want to cover the activate camera and reselect object buttons here in the side panel. Okay, so one feature with the camera list that you can do is you can quickly select between the different cameras and it will jump to the first frame of that camera if you select them via the list. If you do not have activate camera on, and I jump out of the camera here, you can click these buttons, but what happens is it won't jump into the camera, it'll just select the camera object and it will move the timeline to the first frame of the camera. If you have activate camera on, it'll actually jump into it and activate the camera. Reselect object is useful if you are, let's say, automating your grease pencil drawings, and basically you are just going between cameras and filling your drawings or cleaning things up. If you have reselect object on and then I select a new camera, it'll stay it'll keep the grease pencil object selected and keep you in draw mode. So here, if I jump to this third camera, it'll jump to frame 200 while still keeping the grease pencil object selected. Okay, so now if we want to render our camera footage, we can render a Playblast, and then it will automatically upload into our VSE workspace and scene. So you want to come down here and expand the Playblast tools. First thing you're going to want to do is select an output folder where you want to actually save these MP4 Playblast files. Second, you want to select the video editing scene that we set up originally. So whatever you named it, you just want to make sure that this is put here. It's basically going to tell Whippet that it needs to import your Playblast renders into the video editing scene. Then you have a couple options here. If you want to burn in metadata into the actual image, you can do that. If you want to adjust how that actually appears inside your renders, you want to come to output, and then you want to scroll all the way down to burn into image. And then these are my settings. I found that having a font size of 30 is pretty good. And then here we have a default channel number. So this is it defaults at channel 5, but you can set it to whatever. So if I go over here, it'll basically import all the video strips into channel 5, leaving you some room to add audio or dialogue for your animatic purposes. So we have a few options here on how we actually want to render things. The first one is render stepped. This will render the footage like your classic, storyboard stepped interpolation rather than, a smooth camera move. It'll jump between the camera animation. Just a note here, this will only render out where there are object keyframes. It will not render out where there's a grease pencil keyframe. So if you want to ensure that every single drawing that you've done in the Dopesheet is actually rendered, then you need to ensure that there's an object keyframe for that drawing. So I'm going to go ahead as an example and just insert a duplicate drawing using my Whippet Tools, which I'll show in the next section how to get that all set up. But here I'm just going to hit Shift-D, and I'm basically going to duplicate this drawing that I had earlier here. So now you'll notice that there's no actual object transformation key here. So this drawing here will not render, even though it's the same drawing, but basically this frame 50 won't render. So the way step will render is it'll render frame 40, and then it'll render frame 59 here, and then 68, 79, 100. And it will do that for both cameras, so we get it from all the different angles. But in order to actually ensure that our drawings are rendered, what you can do is you can highlight all of your drawings. Let's say you had a bunch of them. I can hit Shift-D at all of these at various points, let's say. And then you can basically just select all of them. And I have a feature, if you scroll down to the Whippet Tools section here, and then go to Grease Pencil Object Tools, down here there's a button called Add X Keys. And what this will do is it'll add an object transformation key for all of the selected Grease Pencil keyframes you have here. So if I hit this button, and it will also respect the actual animation itself. So it shouldn't really change the timing of my original animation. And then now when we render this, you'll see that it's actually stepped. Okay, and then we can choose to render all the cameras that are active. So if one of them is toggled off, it won't render that camera, but we can toggle them all on. You can render the active camera, so whichever one is active, it'll only render that one. The last feature is to render PNG stills. In order to do that, all you have to do is highlight which frames you actually want to render out. I've added a third camera here to show you an example, because what will happen is it'll just loop through the cameras individually and export all the frames for those cameras, and it'll produce a stills folder inside your Playblast output folder, and then inside that stills folder you'll get an individual camera folder, and then in there you'll get all your PNGs by frame and also by version. So if you were to render all these stills twice, then you'll have a version number 2 attached to the second round of rendering. So I'll hit render stills, and then I'll throw up on the screen what it looks like in the folder. Let's go ahead and just render all 3 shots. So I'm just going to hit render all, and it will render through each camera all the way through between its ins and out points, and then it'll automatically bring us over to the video editing workspace in order for us to be able to cut our footage together how we want. Okay, great. So here you can see that it automatically brought us over to our video editing workspace, and it went ahead and auto imported all the cameras. And here you can see we've got that stepped, if I just hit play here, you can see we have that stepped animation. And here we can see that all the footage is actually covered from end to end for each camera. Okay, so as an example, this is where we can now kind of refine and cut down things that we don't need, or maybe we can play around with and edit. If you open the end panel in the sequencer, you can access additional tools for helping you cut and trim things down faster. So for instance, if I want to cut this shot down as they're on top of the box, then I can go over here and hit trim right. What it will do is it will take off all of the frames right of the playhead of the selected video strip. So again, if depending where you want to be, you can just hit that, and it'll trim all of the frames after that. This is handy because currently in Blender you have to drag that and then select this or that, and then you kind of have to go through a whole process, or you hit K to cut, delete, and then Control click, and then G and all that stuff. So it's kind of a nuisance. So I added these couple of features here, and then if you hit auto set frame range, after you trim, it'll automatically set the frame range to all the strips. And then if you want to do frame on render range, it'll basically kind of like snap all of the video strips to basically be zoomed in on it. So if I Control Z and then select this and then hit trim right, it'll basically kind of center all of your video strips. So you can I can hit trim left and we'll just stay centered on the whole scene if you want to do that. My pro tip is to right click and add these to quick favorites, or you can add keyboard shortcuts in order to be able to quickly trim. So what I like to do is I hit Q and then trim right, and then I can play around with where the cut happens. So maybe we cut here, trim right, and then here we want to trim left here. Okay, so now you can see we have coverage of our person jumping up on our box, and then maybe we cut out of this shot sooner, select this one, trim right, and then now we cut to our character here. And then lastly, we have an EDL export feature. So if you want to rename these video strips to reflect a sequence or have a certain shot prefix, and you want to assign different shot numbers with a different increment level, which is what we do at Lucasfilm, you can totally do that. So here we have a shot prefix of AAA and then a starting shot number of 10, and we increment 10. So it'll go 10, 20, 30, 40. This gives you room to insert additional shot numbers if you need to down the road. What you want to do is highlight all the shots you want to rename and then hit assign shot labels. And what happens is all the video strips are renamed so that you have that shot prefix with that shot number. So you have a clear, naming convention. And then if you want to actually export everything, you can select all the video strips. Then you want to choose where you want to export your editorial folder, and then basically a folder will be made with the MP4 footage will be copied into that editorial folder, as well as an EDL document. If you're curious how I have this specific little heading for each video strip, if you come here to the top right to overlays, you can decide which things are displayed, like source, name, thumbnails, all that stuff is here, color tags. So these are my settings. If you use multiple scenes, each scene will be assigned a different color. So when it's imported here, it'll receive a color tag. So that's why I have this toggle on. So you can tell where the footage is coming from, if it's coming from a different scene or not. The last button here is go to camera and scene. So let's say we want to hop back into the scene where we were working originally. We can actually basically scrub through any of the video strips, select the video strip we want to go back into and work on. So let's say I want to add an actual expression at this frame. you can just select the video strip and then hit this button. I've got this map to double left click. So if I double left click on this video strip, I'll actually just jump right back to that frame. And then here, I can, I'll hit Shift D, duplicate this same drawing here, and then, maybe our character's stoked that they made it over the box. And then now, as an example, I can go ahead and re-render this specific camera. So I can hit Render Active. It'll jump me back to the video editing workspace. And then in order to actually see that update, we can right-click, go down to the bottom where it says Take Version, and then it's basically going to swap out this strip for this newly rendered version. And it's always going to refer to the different takes of the same camera name. So if I hit that, now you can see we've actually updated the video strip to be the new version. So again, if you want to go back, you can right click and look at the previous version if you want to do that. And now I'm going to show you all the Whippet GP tools to help make drawing in Blender faster with Grease Pencil. Whippet GP was the add-on I released last year, so if you're familiar with that, it's pretty much the same, except now it's actually tied in with the camera strips. So I'll go ahead and just create a new camera and then create a new Grease Pencil object. I'm going to turn on my gizmos, and then I'm going to hit this create a Grease Pencil right in front of the camera. Okay, so now that we have that, I've got one camera here, and I've got a new Grease Pencil object. And anytime you create a Grease Pencil object with these buttons, which also live down here, add GP cam, add GP cursor, they will automatically be put into this Whippet GPs folder. And in that folder, we'll be able to cycle through Grease Pencil objects more quickly, so long as they live within this folder or in your shot layer folder, which I'll show in a little bit. You could just start drawing, and then you could, manually move the timeline ahead and then insert a new drawing and then, keep doing that. But that's a little slow because you're constantly manually moving the timeline. And similar to Storyboard Pro, we can actually, where we insert a panel and it automatically holds for a certain frame, we can do that using the Whippet GP tools. Okay, so over here underneath the Whippet GP tools, we have insert keyframe options. These are basically going to help us set how long we want a drawing to hold for. And then we can also add a new one, duplicate. We can clear all of the strokes on all the layers, or we can actually delete the keyframe. These are all mapped to keyboard shortcuts. So if you install that Python file at the start, this should all just work for you if you have my shortcut thing set up. So if I want to actually insert a new drawing quickly without going to the Dopesheet, I can just hit Shift F and it will insert new drawings for all the layers that are on a Grease Pencil object. So I can do that, just draw something and then hit Shift F and draw something and then hit Shift F. And now what you see is that because my frame hold is 12, all these drawings will be held for 12 frames. And if you notice here, the camera strip actually adjusted in order to account for that last drawing that I inserted, and it moves it so that it will be held for 12 frames. So again, if I insert a new drawing, you can see that both the camera strip and the new drawing is being inserted. So this synchronization is new in Whippet GP and Whippet Shots. Those are separate add-ons, but now with this version of Whippet, inserting new drawings are now synced with the actual camera strips, basically making it kind of giving you that Storyboard Pro feeling where you're just focused on that panel to panel, drawing to drawing experience. So you're not totally focused on timing, which is a whole nother thing in itself. So if you want to change how many frames a drawing holds for, you can just adjust it here. By default, it's 12. If you want to duplicate a drawing, you can hit Shift D. So that will just duplicate everything. So you can see that it stays there. If you want to clear layers, as I mentioned before, that shortcut's D. So that'll delete all the drawings, regardless of what layer it's on. So now you can see they're all gone. And then delete frame is deleting a keyframe. So if I hit Control D, it'll actually delete the entire keyframe itself. This feature here, number of frames, basically, if you're just like sketching and not doing storyboarding, you could add a bunch of frames in bulk. I don't recommend doing this if you're storyboarding. It's more if you're just like wanting to sketch and doodle. That's what I use it for. It does not time out your cameras automatically. So just keep that in mind. So lastly, if you want to insert an in-between drawing somewhere, do one of two things. I could just hit Shift F and then it will basically split the difference and literally insert a drawing in between. Or if you toggle on retain timing, it'll insert a new drawing and it will make sure that the timing is held between the new drawing and the next drawing. It will also ensure that the timing of your last drawing to the end of your camera strip is also maintained. So this is just to account for if you manually change the timing of the endpoint of a camera, it'll ensure that that timing is held. So generally I keep this on for adding in-betweens. Okay, now you've probably noticed that I'm using A and F to jump between the drawings. So instead of going down to the timeline to scrub, I can just use F to jump forward to the next drawing, or I can use A to jump back. These are my hotkeys in Storyboard Pro, so you can manually time out your animation, or you can just kind of flip through the drawings. Here we have keyframe flipping options. Basically, it allows you to refine how you actually jump between drawings. You can say the active layer. This will basically set it so that it will only jump between keyframes for the active layer. So now that I deleted those two keyframes, it'll just jump to anywhere there is an active keyframe on that specific layer that you're on. If you do GP keys, then it will ignore any object transformation. So if I have, if I move the actual grease pencil object itself, and I've got this GP keys toggled on, it'll ignore any of the object transformation. So again, if I turn off active layer, it'll just jump to every drawing, but it won't jump to the object keys. So you have that ability as well. And then lastly, you have loop keyframes. So it'll loop to the beginning of either the scene range or the preview range. So if you want to use the preview range and like specifically just loop through these drawings, then you can hit F and then it'll jump back to the beginning of the preview range. And if you don't use a preview range, then it will just loop through everything up to the end of the scene range. These keyframe flipping options can also be located on the Dopesheet header. So here you can jump between. You can also toggle GP keys, active layer, and looping with these buttons. And then as well as in your end panel, the same menu lives in your Dopesheet. Okay, so one of the most common ways to use Blender and storyboarding is to actually just take screenshots of your 3D environment and then you draw over them in Storyboard Pro. You can still do this using Whippet. You would just use the render still features in order to actually render PNGs, and then you can do camera moves and then render them out, import those PNG files into your 2D software and then draw over them. That's totally fine. However, I tried making this 2D storyboard mode where you can essentially use just a couple of grease pencil objects that every time you insert a new camera will automatically reposition themselves to be in front of the new next camera, essentially just giving you a clean camera setup every time you create a shot. And then because we can use the camera flipping tools, we can essentially draw, not have to worry about retiming the camera. And every time we insert a new camera, it'll just auto create camera bars for us. It'll move on the timeline for you. So I'll show you how to set that up right now. Okay, so I still have that original grease pencil object that I made in front of the camera. Just to show you, I'll just draw a circle, and if I jump out of the camera, you can see that the grease pencil object and its origin lives just 2 meters in front of the camera, which is what this function does here. So now with this 2D storyboard mode, we just need to basically tell Whippet where you want the default position of a grease pencil object to live every time you make a new camera. So if we're happy with it just being, 2 meters in front of the camera, then just pretend, that it's like a 2D plane. Then we can come down to our Whippet tools and hit set location. What this will do is it'll tell Whippet that this is exactly where we want the grease pencil object to reappear every time we make a new camera. And you can actually do this for multiple grease pencil objects. If I want to add a new one, I can hit this button. And then let's say I want it to be a foreground object, so I can go ahead and just maybe rename this. I'm going to actually bring it closer to camera. So you can do a couple of things. You can just go out of the camera or do GY, move it closer. This way, every time you create a new camera, you can have, you have one grease pencil object that can maybe be a foreground, give you some natural parallax, that kind of thing. So I'll just go ahead and put that here. So now you can see we've got our foreground grease pencil object and we've got our original grease pencil object. Set the location for this one as well. You can select multiple and then hit set location, and it will tell you that it's done that for 2 objects. There's a couple other features that are worth noting. There's this button called reposition. The way this works is anytime you want to reposition the grease pencil object back to its default location, you can do that at any point. So if I just move the camera to look for a different shot, for example, I can select both the grease pencil objects and then hit reposition, and then they'll basically come right back in front of the camera, just like I had them in the previous setup. So anywhere you go and you want to like draw from here with a certain camera, then you can hit reposition and they will be positioned right in front of the camera, just like how you set it. There is also a show in front feature, which allows you to display the grease pencil object in front of anything. So let's say the grease pencil object, I'm just going to move them in the background here. Let's say the grease pencil object is behind something, but I want to make sure that I'm drawing the full body. You can hit show in front, and this will basically display it above everything else. This button also lives here, so you can quickly toggle it on and off while you're drawing. The sync layers, cycle GP up and down buttons allow you to actually quickly cycle through the grease pencil objects that are within the Whippet GP's collection folder or in any shot layer, which I'll show in a bit. So if you click this, it'll actually cycle to the next one. And with my keyboard shortcuts, I have this bound to S. So I can just hit S in draw mode, hit S, and then it will cycle between the different objects. So I can, draw on one object, quickly cycle to the next, and then keep going. And then if you want to sync layers, which basically means if you are on the, let's say this foreground object was on the fill layer, and I hit sync layers. Now if I go to the other John object, it'll actually sync up the layers here and then switch it over to fill. So you can toggle this on and off as well. If let's say you're going through cleaning or you're automating all your drawings, you can just hit sync, and then every time you switch to a different grease pencil object, which could be a different character, you can then always be on that fill layer. It'll do its best to match up the name, so try and be consistent with using the same layer names between grease pencil objects. Lastly, pin materials is a feature where you can, on a per layer basis, remember what the last used material is. So if you, for instance, if I'm on the fill layer here and I pick blue, it'll remember anytime I go back to this grease pencil object's fill layer that I had blue. So if I hit S to go to the foreground object, I can draw here, and then if I hit S again, I'm already back on John's fill layer and I'm drawing with blue again. So it's just a quality of life thing to be able to remember a certain color if you need to. Okay, let's go ahead and draw a couple of shots. So I am using my mouse, I'm not on my tablet, so excuse the drawings, but we're just gonna have John walk up to the well and then look down inside. So again, if I want to insert a new drawing, I hit Shift F. And again, let's say I add one more, you'll see the camera bar extend. So essentially what we're doing is we're drawing on top of the camera in a sense. We're not actually drawing the character walking across the ground. So if I were to just show you outside of the camera what this looks like, we are drawing on top of the 3D set essentially. So this is cheated. So sometimes you do need reference for scale and all, you might need a 3D figure in there, but this is just a way to work and not have to, take all your screenshots from Blender and then export it and then open in Storyboard Pro and cut it up and start drawing. You could totally do that, but now we have a way of just using panel to panel experience while kind of drawing over the camera in a simplistic way. Now, let's say I want to cut to a shot of John getting closer to the well. So here, maybe I just find a shot like this. I can change the focal length. I'm going to do a 50 for like a medium shot. And in order to have this 2D storyboard mode, we want to ensure that we have 2D storyboard mode toggled on. And then this, if you have it toggled off, when you click this, it'll automatically toggle this on. And this is insert new GB keys, which any grease pencil object that lives in this collection will automatically be repositioned, and it will insert blank drawings. So it's basically giving you a whole clean setup in order for you to keep drawing. So, and the keyboard shortcut I have for create a new camera, so that way I'm never touching the timeline, is Control-Shift-F. And in 2D storyboard mode, basically all it does is it prevents overlapping camera footage. So instead of the camera being created and the first point of that camera is here, it's actually going to jump into the future based on our camera gap here. So maybe if I just reduce the duration and I reduce the camera gap, you'll see an example. So I don't even have to touch the timeline, and I can just find this new shot, and I can hit Control-Shift-F, and then right now I've got a new camera. It's jumped the timeline, and it's automatically repositioned both the foreground and John. So you see me switching between the two, and it's just repositioned. And the way this is working is it's actually moving the grease pencil object and give it a constant keyframe so that it snaps into position. That way, when we switch to another camera, the grease pencil object is right in front of that camera. I'll go ahead and draw this next shot. All right, so now we got John bending over and looking down the well. So again, here we can see our shots, and I'm just flipping through using A and F. If I want to hide all the other camera icons, then I can go ahead and hit this button, and any camera that's not active will be hidden. So I kind of just have a clean looking workspace. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and make another camera, and I'm just going to get a POV of him looking down the well. Again, I'm going to hit Control-Shift-F, and the camera will automatically be placed on the timeline for me. Maybe I want to reposition this guy a little bit so it's more directly down. Something like that is fine. And then I don't really need a drawing for this, so I think the next shot I'm just going to go ahead and make an upshot looking back out of the well. Shift-F, and then I'm going to go ahead and maybe just kind of come down a little bit, see what, maybe frame him in a way. Okay, I'm gonna, since I moved the camera a little bit, I'm gonna go ahead and actually reposition him in the foreground object because I moved the camera just to make sure that they're in front of the camera properly. So again, if I go to object mode, I can see the little dot here. So again, we are just drawing right in front of the camera. Okay, so now we've got 4 shots, and we can just flip through all of them so we can see how it plays out. And again, I've not touched the timeline whatsoever. I've just used my keyboard shortcuts, and I can flip through all the drawings. And if you do want to watch this back, we can hit the Whippet play button, and then it will jump all the gaps that we have so we can watch our scene play out. And naturally, these last couple cameras are kind of short, so I can always just go to the camera list and I can increase the duration of the POV. But this kind of shows the core idea of this 2D storyboard mode, where we're kind of just auto repositioning the object so we can draw cleanly to a new camera. All right, the last few things I want to show you are the menus down at the bottom. Here we've got the outliner, we've got a shot layer collection system, camera constraints, so we can parent grease pencil objects to cameras on a per camera basis. So the same grease pencil object can have multiple parents. The way it works is the influence of the constraint is driven on a per camera basis. So if you go to the constraint tab, you can see I have one set up here. So the influence is 1 when it's on this camera, and you can tell by the name of the constraint, it says parented to the camera name. You can also apply a blur effect, which will be on a per camera basis as well. This is the layers menu that you can get here. It's just more accessible over here. And then you also have the brush menu, and then you also have the materials menu. And all those now live in this pop-up custom grease pencil menu as well. For the shot layer collection system, the way it works is every time you create a camera, there's also a folder that appears, and anytime you want an object to just only appear in that one shot, and you basically just want to throw it in a shot and ignore it, then you can select the object that you want to just put in that one shot, and then you can say add to shot. And so now anytime you leave this shot, that object will no longer be visible in the scene. If you're interested in using the Storyboard add-on for Blender 4.5, you can purchase the add-on off my website, linked in the description below. There is a full documentation page that covers all the features. If you have already purchased Whippet, I really appreciate it, and please do join the Discord server where you can suggest features and report any bugs. If you're interested in learning 3D storyboarding in Blender, I will be teaching my next class in spring 2026. If you're wanting to learn 3D storyboarding this winter, then I highly recommend checking out Spitfire Storyboards, who offers a pre-recorded masterclass series available on Gumroad. I've linked that below as well. As I mentioned at the start of the video, Whippet is a simpler add-on, and it's designed for 2D artists looking to learn Blender. If you want more features or you're already familiar with using Blender, then I recommend checking out the other add-ons. All their links are below. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please consider subscribing and liking the video if you're interested to learn more about storyboarding and Previs in Blender.